Have you noticed there is a certain kind of person who doesn't fear silence? They seek it. You've probably felt this yourself on nights when the world grew too loud, and the quiet room you walked into felt like a soft exhale, a place where your heartbeat finally matched the rhythm of your thoughts. People assume solitude is a sign of withdrawal, a symptom of sadness, or a reflection of brokenness. But you know, in a way you can't always explain, that being alone carries a strange comfort, like stepping into a warm shadow that finally fits the shape of your soul. You carry this truth quietly because the world is quick to misunderstand it. They see someone who chooses the corner seat at a gathering and whisper that you're distant. They notice how you slip away early, how your energy drains faster in crowded rooms, and they label you antisocial, avoidant, or cold. Yet what they never see is the quiet storm inside you, the sensitivity, the depth, the way your mind reads, the emotional temperature of a room before others even register it. They don't know how heavy that constant awareness can be, how it makes solitude not an escape, but a form of self-preservation. Maybe it started years ago, before you even had words for it. A child sitting at the edge of a noisy living room, feeling everything too intensely. A child who learned early that people are unpredictable, emotions are contagious, and silence becomes a kind of shelter. It becomes the place where you don't have to perform, where you don't have to translate yourself into versions that make others comfortable, where you don't have to shrink or stretch to be understood. In silence, you simply exist, and that, somehow, feels like safety. There is a science behind it too, though you may not have known it. Some minds process the world more deeply. Some nervous systems react more intensely to noise, conflict, or social unpredictability. For these people, solitude regulates the inner chaos. It is not loneliness, it is equilibrium. Loneliness is what you feel when you can't connect. Solitude is what you feel when you finally do. And yet, even with its comfort, solitude carries its own shadow. Because the more you retreat into it, the more the world begins to blur at the edges. The more you protect your inner world, the harder it becomes to let anyone enter it. You learn to prefer silence, but you also learn to hide inside it. Still, this is only the beginning of the story. Because the strange comfort of being alone is never just about today, it is rooted in something older, something softer, something forgotten. And to understand why solitude feels like home, you have to return to the first place it ever saved you. Have you ever wondered when it truly began, that instinct you have to seek quiet places, to slip into solitude the way others slip into conversation? Somewhere in your childhood, long before you understood psychology or patterns or attachment styles, you learned something quietly, almost accidentally. Silence could protect you in ways people couldn't. You were just a child, but the world around you often felt too sharp. Maybe the house wasn't violent, but it was unpredictable voices rising without warning, tension in the air so thick it made your small chest tighten. Maybe nothing dramatic happened, yet everything felt emotionally unstable. You learned to read the energy before you understood the words. You could sense when an adult was moody, when something was about to erupt, when it was better to disappear. And so you did into your room, into your drawings, into the soft refuge of being alone. There is a memory you might still feel in your bones. Sitting on the floor with a toy or a book, not because you were told to, but because being around people demanded too much from you. You didn't have the vocabulary to describe overstimulation or emotional absorption, but your nervous system knew. You felt everything. The disappointment behind your parents' sigh, the frustration hidden in their silence, the heaviness they tried to ignore, Children like you don't rebel. You retreat. You become small enough to survive. And maybe the adults praised you for it. You were easy, calm, no trouble. They loved the version of you that stayed quiet, that didn't complain, that handled their inconsistency with a maturity you were far too young to possess. You learned a dangerous lesson without realizing it. Your needs were easier to carry when you kept them inside. Your emotions were safer when no one else had access to them. People applauded your quietness without seeing the loneliness beneath it. Psychologists call this an avoidant attachment response, the child who learns that expressing need brings no comfort, so they turn inward. Neuroscience shows that these patterns don't fade with time. The brain wires itself around safety, and for you, safety lived in solitude. When other phasins, children ran toward noise and attention, you found comfort in the quiet world you built inside your mind. Alone time was never a punishment. It was your first act of self-protection. And so the seed was planted, the idea that silence is safer than uncertainty, that your room is more predictable than human emotion, that solitude is the only place where your nervous system can finally breathe. A child who grows up like this doesn't suddenly become an adult who loves being alone. It happens slowly, quietly, like a shadow that lengthens with the setting sun. But every shadow has a shape, and yours would eventually become a mask, the one you carry into adulthood, without even realizing when you first learned to wear it. Have you ever noticed how, somewhere along the way, you learn to move through the world with a softness that protects you? Not loud, not brash, not demanding, just quietly present, like a shadow that chooses where it wishes to fall. People think this is your personality, but you know it's something deeper. It's the mask you learned to wear long before adulthood arrived, the one built not from deceit, but from survival. As an adult, you navigate rooms differently. You step into a gathering and instantly sense the emotional temperature, as if your mind carries a built-in radar for tension. You observe before you speak, you feel before you act, and most of all, you withdraw before the noise inside you becomes too loud. Others mistake this for shyness, or aloofness, or indifference. But the truth is simpler and far more misunderstood. You've spent years learning how to protect the parts of yourself that the world didn't know how to hold. Your quietness is not emptiness, it's armor. A gentle armor, but armor nonetheless. You find yourself craving conversations that have weight, exchanges that don't feel like sand slipping through your fingers. You grow restless when small talk drags on, as if your mind is starving in a garden, without water. You watch people laugh loudly, perform loudly, live loudly, and you wonder how they do it so effortlessly. For you, that kind of energy feels borrowed, maybe even forced. Your peace comes from stillness, the way a forest regains itself after a storm. And yet, none of this means you're broken. Neuroscience shows that some people process emotional and sensory information more deeply, meaning chaotic environments drain their internal battery faster. Psychologists call this high sensitivity. Others call it introversion. But you simply call it truth, the way you've always been wired, the way silence resets you like nothing else ever could. But it creates a strange duality inside you. On the outside, you look calm, composed, low maintenance. On the inside, you're carrying currents of perception and intuition that others don't see. You feel the shift in someone's smile before they notice it themselves. You sense when a conversation is hiding a wound. You understand what isn't being said. And because of this, solitude becomes more than a preference. It becomes the only place where you're not absorbing everyone else's emotions like a sponge. People ask you, why don't you talk more? Why don't you come out more? Why are you so distant? They never realize that your distance is not rejection, it's restoration. You're not avoiding the world, you're trying to survive it without losing yourself. And this mask you wear, this quietness others don't understand, did not appear overnight. It has roots, deep ones, in the way your mind and heart learned to protect themselves long before adulthood gave you words for it. But understanding those roots requires looking beneath the mask and into the mind that built it. And science has more to say about that than most people realize. Have you ever wondered why certain moments drain you while others seem to bring you back to life? Why an hour of conversation can leave you exhausted, yet an hour alone can feel like someone quietly stitching your spirit back together? People often rush to call it introversion, as if one word can explain an entire inner universe. But the truth is far more intricate, woven into your biology, your history, and the way your mind learned to survive long before you ever understood yourself. Neuroscience shows that some people have a different relationship with stimulation, not better, not worse, just different. Your brain might react more intensely to noise, conflict, cluttered environments, even the subtle shifts in another person's expression. Studies on dopamine sensitivity reveal that highly attuned minds don't crave constant social reward. They don't need the external buzz to feel alive. Instead, your nervous system thrives in quieter spaces because that's where it can regulate itself without fighting the currents of overstimulation. You can feel this in everyday moments. When you step into a noisy room, it's as if the volume of the world rises inside your chest, not just around it. When someone speaks with too much intensity, you don't just hear their tone, you absorb it. Your brain processes emotional data deeply, thoroughly, sometimes painfully. This is why solitude feels so necessary. It's not running away. It's rebalancing the way a snow globe settles after being shaken. Psychologists often describe people like you as highly sensitive persons, not fragile, but finely tuned. Your emotional antenna picks up signals others miss. You sense tension before a word is spoken, sense disappointment that never makes it into a sentence, sense the shift in someone's energy even when they smile. This isn't imagination, it's perception. And perception, when constant, becomes weight. Solitude becomes the only place where you can finally set it down. Attachment theory also lingers in the background of this story. When you grow up learning that your emotional world is yours to handle alone, you don't develop fear, you develop self-sufficiency. Not because you don't trust others, but because your nervous system learned early that safety often comes from within. So yes, you sometimes withdraw. Yes, you sometimes hesitate to rely on people. But this isn't avoidance. It's emotional intelligence shaped by experience. People misunderstand this nuance. They think solitude equals fear, or trauma, or avoidance. But sometimes it is simply wisdom, the wisdom of knowing your limits, your rhythms, your thresholds. You are not escaping people. You are creating space to hear your own mind without interruption. Still, even wisdom can cast a shadow, and the very traits that protect you can, slowly and quietly, begin to isolate you if you're not careful. Because when silence becomes too familiar, it can turn from a sanctuary into a wall. And that shadow is where the next chapter of your story begins. Have you ever noticed how something that once saved you can slowly turn into something that traps you? How the silence that once healed your mind can, over time, become a kind of quiet prison? There comes a moment, often subtle, almost invisible, when solitude shifts from being a sanctuary to becoming a wall. A beautiful wall, a peaceful wall, a familiar wall, but a wall nonetheless. You feel this most in the in-between moments. When someone asks if you want to hang out, and your first instinct isn't no, yet the word slips out anyway. When a message pings on your phone and you stare at it for hours, telling yourself you'll reply later but knowing later may never come? When someone tries to get close, and instead of opening even a single window, you retreat into the safety of your inner castle, a castle with no doors, built stone by stone from every moment the world felt too unpredictable. You didn't build these walls out of bitterness. You built them out of self-preservation. But eventually the structure becomes so tall and so silent that even you forget how to step outside it. There's a strange emotional paradox inside you now. You crave connection deeply, quietly, almost painfully. Yet the idea of letting someone in feels like handing them something too delicate to trust in unfamiliar hands. Your heart remembers what disappointment felt like. Your nervous system still flinches at the idea of being misunderstood. So instead of risking intimacy, you choose the familiar rhythm of being alone, even when it aches. Psychologists call this self-isolation, but it doesn't feel like a condition to you. It feels like habit, a reflex, a shadow that follows you even when you're trying to walk into the light. The very traits that helped you survive sensitivity, awareness, emotional depth now whisper warnings every time someone moves too close. Neuroscience shows that the brain can confuse safety with sameness, preferring the predictable quiet of loneliness to the brain, unpredictable noise of love. Inside your solitude, everything is controlled. Nothing surprises you, nothing hurts you, but nothing grows either. It's like tending a garden that never sees sunlight. You water it with your routines, shield it from storms, keep it perfectly arranged, yet it remains dim, muted, half alive. You've kept yourself safe, but you've also kept yourself small. And the most haunting truth is this: no one knows the real you. Not because you're unlovable, but because you've hidden the parts of yourself that breathe. Still, this shadow is not the ending of your story. It is only the midpoint, the moment where the quiet becomes too heavy, the walls feel too high, and you begin to wonder what life looks like beyond them. And to understand that, you must look outward, toward the world that shaped your beliefs about solitude in the first place. Have you ever noticed how the world never stops celebrating noise? How the loudest person in the room is often mistaken for the most confident, the most successful, the most alive? Modern society worships extroversion like a religion, praising constant motion, non-stop connection, and a personality that shines outward like a spotlight. And in this worship, quiet people like you become misunderstood shadows, defined not by who you are, but by what you refuse to pretend to be. From a young age, you're told that happiness looks a certain way: crowded rooms, wide smiles, endless conversations, group photos with bright filters. You're taught that to be fulfilled, you must be visible. To be loved, you must be accessible. To be successful, you must be loud. So when you choose silence, or solitude, or space, people assume something is wrong. They treat your inner life like a malfunction they need to fix. You can feel this pressure everywhere. In hustle culture, where rest is seen as laziness. In social media, where your worth seems tied to how often you show your life to strangers. In workplaces, where speaking constantly is confused with thinking clearly. Even in friendships, where not responding instantly is considered distance or coldness or indifference. The world rarely pauses long enough to understand someone who carries their depth inward. And yet, if you look across history, the monks who walked alone through forests, the sages who sat beneath ancient trees, the samurai who trained in silence, the philosophers who wrote by candlelight solitude was not weakness. It was a path, a discipline, a form of clarity that noise could never give. The modern world has forgotten this, replacing contemplation with consumption and silence with distraction. But your mind remembers, even if you don't fully realize it. You've probably felt that strange guilt when you choose to stay home rather than join a crowd. That faint anxiety when someone asks, "Why don't you go out more?" That subtle shame when people label you a loner, as if solitude is a flaw instead of a preference. But beneath all of that lies a truth the world doesn't acknowledge. Your quiet nature is not a failure to meet societal expectations. It is a refusal to abandon your inner alignment. The irony is almost poetic. Society teaches people to fear solitude as if it is emptiness. But for you, it feels like fullness, a return, a rebalancing, a place where your thoughts stop scattering like frightened birds and settle into something coherent, honest, and alive. Still, even a peaceful inner world carries its emotional cost, because while solitude protects you from noise, it also distances you from connection. And that distance, over time, begins to carve its own kind of ache, the quiet ache that leads into the next chapter of your story. Have you ever felt the kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being without people, but from being unable to let anyone close enough to see you? It's a quiet ache, the kind that grows in the spaces between your thoughts, the kind that settles into your chest like a weight you've gotten too used to carrying. When you prefer solitude, the world assumes you cannot be lonely, but your loneliness has always been a different kind. It's the loneliness of self-containment, of holding every emotion inside because you don't know how to place it in someone else's hands. You feel it in small, unexpected moments. You're scrolling through your phone late at night, seeing people laugh together, argue together, live together, and even though you don't crave constant social noise, there's a whisper inside you that wonders what it would feel like to be held emotionally, without hesitation. You watch others connect effortlessly, like their hearts come with open doors, while yours has always been a slow-moving gate, rusted from years of protecting itself. There's a moment you might know too well, standing at a distance while others talk, joke, melt into each other's presence. You feel the pull to join them, a gentle tug from somewhere deep inside, but habit holds you in place, like your feet are rooted in the quiet soil of your past. You tell yourself you're fine. You tell yourself you don't need it. You tell yourself silence is where you thrive. But beneath those truths lies another truth, softer and harder to admit. You want to be known, but you're terrified of being seen. Psychology explains this as emotional self-sufficiency, a trait that forms when you learn early that your needs must be managed alone. So now, as an adult, asking for help feels like stepping into an unfamiliar landscape. Expressing vulnerability feels like handing someone the blueprint to your weaknesses. Even trusting someone enough to share a difficult moment feels like exposing a wound you've kept neatly stitched under layers of calm. And so you push through everything alone, every bad day, every overthinking spiral, every moment of doubt, every night when your thoughts feel heavier than usual. You carry it all quietly, because silence has always been your safest companion. But the weight adds up, slowly, invisibly. It presses into your shoulders, wraps itself around your ribs, fills the empty spaces inside you with a tired kind of loneliness, the kind that doesn't cry out, the kind that just lingers like a shadow that never learned how to leave. You survive it, of course. You always do. But deep down, a question grows in the dark. What if this wasn't meant to be carried alone? And that question, fragile as it is, becomes the first small light that leads into the possibility of change. A hint that healing may begin not by abandoning solitude, but by learning how to open its door. Have you ever wondered what healing looks like for someone who finds peace in being alone? Not the loud, dramatic healing the world loves to romanticize, but the quiet, steady, kind that doesn't demand you become someone you're not. There's a strange myth that healing means becoming more social, more open, more outward. But for you, Healing isn't about replacing solitude. It's about reshaping it, turning it from a shield into a sanctuary. You start to feel this shift the moment you realize that your solitude doesn't have to protect you from the world. It can coexist with connection, gently, slowly, on your own terms. And it begins in the smallest moments. A conversation you allow yourself to stay in just a little longer. A feeling you choose not to hide. A truth you speak even though your voice trembles. Healing isn't loud, it rarely announces itself. It shows up like a soft light under a closed door. It may even start with one person. Someone who feels safe enough that your nervous system doesn't rush to build a wall. Someone who listens without pushing, understands without demanding, stays without crowding. You don't fling your doors open, you simply crack the window. And for someone who has spent years carrying everything alone, even, that is an act of courage. Psychology calls this earned security, the slow rebuilding of trust through consistent, gentle experiences. Your brain learns that connection doesn't always mean danger. That vulnerability doesn't always lead to disappointment. That letting someone see an unguarded part of you isn't the same as losing control. Over time, this rewires you from the inside out, the way roots slowly reshape the soil around them. You begin to recognize your needs not as burdens but as truths. You start expressing them, not perfectly, but honestly. You learn that asking for help doesn't erase your strength, nor does choosing companionship diminish your love for solitude. You discover that you can step outward without abandoning your inner world, that the heart doesn't have to choose between silence and connection. The beauty is, you don't need a crowd. You don't need to become someone loud or universally open. Healing simply asks you to make room for a few meaningful threads of connection, woven carefully into the fabric of your solitude. You keep your quiet, your depth, your inner sanctuary, but now there are a few chairs inside it instead of just one. And slowly, the solitude that once felt like armor begins to feel like home, not a hiding place, but a space you can return to after experiencing the world instead of escaping from it. Because the truth is, healing doesn't take away the quiet parts of you, it simply gives them light. And in that light, you finally begin to understand why your relationship with solitude was only ever half the story, a story that leads toward a quieter, deeper kind of wisdom waiting in the final chapter. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to move through life as if they're carrying a secret, a soft inner world that no one else can fully see? They walk quietly, think deeply, love gently, and disappear into silence, not because they're afraid of the world, but because they hold entire worlds within themselves. And maybe, without realizing it, you've always been one of them. There is a beauty in being someone who feels more than they can explain, someone who has learned to sit with their own thoughts the way others sit with friends, someone who knows that solitude is not emptiness, but a kind of fullness, a place where the noise of the world dims just enough for you to hear the truth you've been carrying all along. It takes strength to be this way, a quiet strength, the kind that doesn't demand recognition or applause, the kind that grows like roots beneath the surface, holding everything together even when no one is watching. You've spent years moving between two worlds, the outer world, where people speak loudly and live quickly, and the inner world, where everything breathes slower, softer. You've learned to find meaning in pauses, in stillness, in the small, unnoticed moments that most people rush past. And though the world often misunderstands you, though it labels your silence as distance or your solitude as sadness, there is a quiet truth you've always felt but rarely say out loud. The depth inside you is not a flaw. It is your greatest gift. Neuroscience might call it sensitivity. Psychology might call it introspection. Philosophy might call it soul awareness, but you know it simply as you, the way your heart listens. the way your mind absorbs. The way you can sit in a room full of people and still hear the faint echo of your own thoughts calling you back home. And yet, the journey you've taken from childhood shadows to adult solitude, from emotional walls to gentle openings, reveals something even more profound. You are not silent because you have nothing to say. You are silent because you have learned to speak only when it matters. You are not alone because you cannot connect. You are alone because your spirit refuses to settle for surface-level living. In a world that demands noise, the quiet ones are the last keepers of depth. So, if you've ever felt different, distant, or misunderstood, remember this: your solitude is not a weakness to outgrow. It is a wisdom to understand, a sanctuary to protect, a compass pointing you inward toward the parts of yourself that were always waiting to be seen. And as you step into the next chapter of your life, carry this truth with you like a lantern in the dark. You are not alone in your silence. You are simply among the few who know how to hear the world without losing the sound of their own soul.